Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coach Krisler's Convos. I am here today with Kaci. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I am great. If you are new to the conversation, this is an unscripted back and forth between two folks who love functional medicine, who love lifestyle change, and just dealing with things in a very natural and personalized manner. So that's what you're going to hear today. And I'm excited for Kaci to share her story. So before we get started with talking about your health journey, will you tell us who you are, where you are from, and what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Kaci Eichels, and I am first and foremost a mom. I'm a mom of two teens. We live here in Massachusetts, but I'm actually from the South. So I have a little bit of two different living experiences. I've lived almost the same time frame in my life in both. I've been a nurse now, actually, in the conventional medicine side for 20 years. And most recently, in the last 3 years, I've also become certified to be able to do some of the functional medicine at-home testing myself that helped me get well. So that's been really exciting to help other people do that in my own business.
That's awesome. I love that you have experience in both spaces because I think that gives you a unique perspective that some people don't have. And I'm sure that somebody out there watching is going to want to hear kind of about that transition
Yeah.
that maybe you've experienced from one to the other. So let's start with that. Let's start with why you even, had that transition. Where did that all start for you?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it was a very slow burn for me. I know for some people, it's a really like this big aha moment and all of that. And for me, it was much, much slower. I had been dealing with sort of gut issues and headaches and hormone issues since I was a young girl, actually, since right in the beginning of my teenage years. And my mother was a nurse. So coming from that conventional medicine side, it was just really all I knew. And my brain is very sciencey. It's very science-based. So I really kind of gravitated in that direction. Started seeing doctors really early, getting prescribed medication for one thing, and then this thing, and then this thing. And it was before you were, I was in my mid-20s. I was taking several different things, for an individual issue, right? And at somewhere in that time frame, I just had enough. I had been going back and forth to doctors at different times and really getting nowhere. It was like two steps forward, two steps back. It was really just this like seesaw sort of.
Mhm.
Of the healthcare system, and nobody was sort of looking at me as a whole person. Looking back, I can see that now. At the time, I didn't get it. And long story short, I finally saw another GI specialist. I had seen another gut specialist, and he had done all the testing and all of the lab work and the scopes and all these things and given me medications, and I wasn't getting better. And he finally sat me down in his office and just said, I don't know what's going on with you. I don't know how to help you. I don't think I'm going to be able to help you. And he said, I'm going to refer you to this place, this clinic, where sometimes I send my patients whom I can't really help. And some of them have had success there. I'm like, great. I am, in my 20s, I'm like, okay, whatever. And I show up to this place having no clue what it was. And it turns out it was a functional medicine clinic. And they were sort of the beginning for me of that journey. They did some of the same testing with me at that time that I do now with clients. And it was the beginning of really understanding that your body is speaking to you all of the time. And I just wasn't listening, and because I didn't know what to listen for, So
Yeah.
that was the beginning of my road down that.
Wow. So, it sounds like so similar to what others experience when they know something's wrong, right? They go to the doctor, they go to some sort of medical professional, and it's like, they are not quite sure, right? And the medical professional is not quite sure, but they keep going because they're like,
Right.
I need to do something, like something's got to change, something's not right. And so that can be a really frustrating experience. Um, what was that like for you as a young woman to kind of be going through it kind of, to me, it seems like, a rat running on a wheel, just
Yeah.
not getting anywhere.
Yeah, it did feel a little bit like that, to be honest, because I felt very hopeless. I felt very lost. I was dealing at the time with not only these gut troubles, and they diagnosed me with irritable bowel syndrome. And, looking back, I'm like, well, of course they're irritable. I know they're irritable,
Right.
like I can feel that. And it's just this sort of catch-all diagnosis. But I didn't know. And then I was dealing with migraines and anxiety, and that eventually turned into panic attacks and period issues and all these things that, looking back now, were, all connected, and I didn't really get it, but I was feeling overwhelmed and hopeless. And because I didn't really know, I didn't know where to turn. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just didn't know where to turn. And so when I finally found somebody that was like going to listen to me, it
Yeah.
felt really, I don't know what the word is. It just felt validating. Right. And so
Yeah.
that's what I hope that I'm offering now to people, is in these types of conversations where you can see yourself in other people, so that you can see you're not alone. Because I did feel very alone. I didn't,
Mhm.
and I was in a relationship at the time. My husband, has been with me. We've been married for 20 years this year. So we've been together through most of this time. And he didn't get it either,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so it was nice to be heard.
Yeah. So what was it like? What would you say was the difference when you would go to a conventional doctor and have, and be examined or whatever,
Yeah.
and then you went to this functional medicine practitioner? Can you explain the difference between those experiences?
Yeah, I think, the biggest difference for me is time spent, right?
Mm.
So in a conventional setting, it's insurance driven. So you are, um, your doctor only has, or even a nurse practitioner, they have a little bit more time, but even your nurse practitioner only has a certain amount of time to spend with you that they can bill your insurance for. Whereas oftentimes with functional medicine, it's a private practice. They can do what they want. They can spend as much time as they want. And I really felt like some of these appointments were an hour and a half long. And you got it all out there. You know what I mean? It wasn't like you're in there going, okay, where's my list? 1, 2, 3. You could really sit and have somebody hear what you were saying
Hmm.
and really hear it, like be really listening. And I think that's the biggest difference, is that time and the ability to listen.
Yeah. It's funny. I've had several practitioners on, and whether they're, nurse practitioners or doctors, and they've all said the same thing. They've said when they have a new patient come, they get their story out and they're talking, talking,
Yeah.
talking, 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 and they get it all out. And then they're waiting for the doctor to give them the answer. And they're like, okay, well, let's go back. Let's talk about that. You mentioned this. And they follow up with them and they ask them more questions and they dig
Right.
deeper. And it's so funny that people who, come from conventional medicine and they see a functional medicine or a naturopath, for the first time, that's what they do. They try to get it all out and tell all the things and answer all the questions, because probably by that point they've said it so many times that they just want
Yeah.
to like tell their story and get it done, right?
Yeah.
Give me the answer. And the
Yeah.
doctor's like, nope, let's backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk more. I want to hear more about that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's the thing, is like, you have that ability when you're in that more functional space. You have that ability to do a little deep dive. And the truth is, the conventional medicine system is made for really sick people. It's made to help you when you really need, it's really great at fixing you when you really are in dire straits. Whereas functional medicine is really about catching you before you get there, catching you before you get to that place when it's either irreversible or too hard to go back for different reasons, or, whatever. It's really about supporting your body to kind of rebalance itself when you give it what it needs. You know what I mean? And conventional medicine, like medication specifically, isn't made for that. Medication, most of it, not all, a lot of it is made to like decrease a symptom, not really fix the problem, the root cause problem,
Right.
Yeah. So you can kind of go down a road on that. But like, I think that's part of it, is when you are in that functional medicine space, they're looking at you as like, what's really underneath? Oh, okay, you have a headache, an aspirin or whatever is going to fix your headache. But like, why are you having that headache?
Right.
And that's really that interesting conversation that you can have with any functional medicine practitioner. And there can be all kinds of different ones,
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have a headache because you have an aspirin deficiency. You have a headache because you're chronically dehydrated, or you have gut issues, or, there's so many things. And that's another thing I think that's beautiful about functional medicine is you and I could walk into the same practitioner's office with the same set of symptoms.
Right.
And the root cause could be different. Now, in general, right, we both need to eat whole foods, and we both need to move our bodies, and, those types of things. However, where you live, what your job is, what your sleep environment is like, what your relationships are different than mine. And so because of that, the way that we are treated, I'll use that word, but the way that we're treated might be totally different because of all of those things. So I think, for a lot of people, they don't recognize that. And again, I think this is because we all kind of go through this conventional medicine walk at first. We expect we're going to get the same medicine dosage, whatever, the same protocol. Whereas in functional medicine, it can be very different because our lives are different, our bodies are different, our responses are different.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I love about it is you come from that foundational place of, like you're saying, the diet, the exercise, what's your stress, what's your sleep like, all of these things. But then within each of those things, there's all these places for nuance. And that's what I really enjoy about it. Even for myself in my own journey, everyone is still on a journey, right? We're not until the end game. It's like, we're still learning and growing and changing. And I mean, even myself, I just came back from a vacation. So like things are a little out of whack. So like now I'm back in my own space and doing my own things. And I can kind of, I know now exactly what I need to dial back in for me, for my body. But, it may not be what my husband needs or my kids need now that we've come back home. So, I just find that so interesting. I could talk about that all day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in thinking about where you were at that point when you started with this functional medicine doctor, what were some of the first things that he noticed with your testing? Let's start with the testing portion. What were some of those things?
So I ended up running a big battery of things because I was like, I need to know this. I need to know I think different people are different, right? So for me, I like the data. I like to see the thing, and I like to know that I'm at least beginning the road in the right direction. Not everybody needs that. People are different. Some people are just like, whatever, we'll just try some things and figure it out. So for me, I had food sensitivities. I had yeast overgrowth. I had SIBO. And many years later, in doing testing in a different clinic, I ended up with heavy metals and parasites and other things. So all the things I had going on over many years' time. It took me longer than most to figure all of that out. But that's kind of where I started. Was I actually my SIBO was bad enough at the time that my GI specialist had actually found it on the conventional testing, which it takes a fair amount to get to that point. And I treated it the conventional way, which made me very sick and did not fix the problem. And so then anyway, then I ended up in this functional clinic. So then I was able to really dial in on what can I do about these food sensitivities and where are they coming from? Like, cause I'm just continuously, I was ingesting, it was things I was ingesting every day. And then what do I do about this SIBO and the yeast? That's where I started, was with those two things really.
So what were some of the things that you're sensitive to?
It turns out, I had a long list of things, but my biggies were the top three for most people, which were gluten, eggs, and cow's milk, dairy. And over the years, as I've been able to heal, I now can like do those things sometimes. Like while we were away, for instance, I was able to, not have to be as restrictive, but like now I need to come home and kind of like rebalance again and dial those things back. I found out, for instance, that gluten was the trigger for the most part for my migraines. And so if I just don't ingest gluten, I don't really have migraines. Migraines can have a million different reasons that you have them, but that was a biggie for me because I was having debilitating headaches, missing work and college at the time. And so those were some of the things like that I really dialed into. But then there were some other minor things like a couple of nut sensitivities that I wasn't expecting, even some weird things like vegetables, certain couple of vegetables that now I'm no longer sensitive to. Once I kind of dialed back all the inflammation that was happening, I'm now not sensitive to those things. But the milk, egg, and dairy they went from up here to down here. So it's less impactful, but I do need to be careful.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you had all of these food sensitivities, and now there's really only 3 that are heavily impactful to you. The other ones, you're able to eat and enjoy and not have that negative consequence, from your body. So, I find that again, once people recognize what the issue is and they start to address it, and as you said, inflammation, for example, once they start to, their inflammation goes down and things like that, their body just doesn't react as horribly as it used to. So,
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is, as I began to address the SIBO and the yeast overgrowth, that was very likely making my gut incredibly leaky because everything was just a mess in there. Once I was able to get those under control, so much less of that food protein is leaking through into your bloodstream and causing problems. And there's, probably a bit of an allergic component somewhere in there as well. It's your body's a complex system. So it's, and that's, again, is kind of what I like about it is it's a bit of detective work, whereas over the years, it's like, okay, I'm sensitive to gluten. And then with little testing here and there myself, like, oh, I'm going to eat a sandwich today. Like, and then you sort of see, what does that do to me? Oh, if I haven't had gluten for 6 months, then it doesn't really impact me at all if I do it as a one-off. But if I eat it every day for a week, I'm miserable for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? It's like, and sort of learning that about myself and beginning to figure out what my body can handle and what is too much for it. If it's in a good place, what can it handle? And if it's not in a good place, what can it handle?
Yeah. I've heard this analogy used. Dr. Carrie Jones uses this a lot when she talks about what you were just saying. When you are filling your bucket little by little with different things, it's like over time, our bucket gets full, it gets fuller. And, you could really just be adding a dropper full of water in your bucket.
Right.
But it's still there, right?
Right.
And once you get to the point where you add that one more dropper and your body's like, I just can't take it anymore. Then it's like, I'm done, right? You get to that point where it's just, and again, I think you're onto something when you say functional medicine is really trying to prevent that. It's trying to allow our bucket to empty out and allow our bodies to stay in a healthier state so that we don't get to this overflowing, uncomfortable, sickly, debilitating point.
Right. And that was really where I started. So I started, on my own, like with these practitioners. And then eventually when I decided to get trained myself, I trained with Dr. Stephen Cabral as an integrative health practitioner. And that's the big thing that he teaches about is he calls it your rain barrel. So it's a similar concept, and your toxic bucket, whatever. And you're filling it all the time with, whatever pesticides you're putting on your lawn and non-organic foods and stress and that, your emotional component and all of the, the makeup you're using on your face, all the things. And so, and eventually, like you're saying, it just overflows. And when it overflows, that's the symptoms. That's when you have symptoms. So at this point, I'm really cognizant of trying to empty my rain barrel as much as I can. So I do a functional medicine style detox 4 times a year to sort of keep myself running clean as much as I can. But then, it's about putting less in there, in the first place. So, living as low tox as I can, working through some of my old emotional stuff that, has resurfaced now in my 40s, like just kind of working on that stuff is really important. And I think I heard another interview that you had done around that emotional component, right? And so that emotional component fills the bucket as well, because you're giving yourself stress hormones and all of these things,
Right.
so you can really go down a road, and it's kind of fun. Once you start to learn about it, it's like, oh, this is really important. I should pay attention to that, and oh, I actually feel better when I do that thing. It can get really interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of self-discovery that brings about more self-awareness that allows you to make better choices for yourself.
Yeah. And, and I think I was saying earlier, I have 2 teenagers. And so it's, sometimes they listen to me, most times they don't. But I mean, I'm hopeful that, over time they're hearing a lot of these things around like, you're actually in control and in charge of your space and your body, and you can do a lot with that. You're not at the mercy of everything around you. And one of my children has had a lot of the same issues I've had, and looking back now, she was my first. And so we're dealing with some of the protocols and doing some of the things with her now to try to rebalance her. And looking back, I'm sure it's because I was a mess when I was pregnant with her, but I didn't know that at the time. Actually getting pregnant with her was one of the big pushes for me to begin to change and begin to seek out different answers. So, unfortunately, I'm sure I passed on a particular microbiome. I passed on a particular, you can get in the weeds on epigenetics and all these things that you kind of pass on. But the truth is that has happened. So how do we deal with it? And we go back to functional medicine and, lab testing and, these protocols and lifestyle factors,
Yeah. So you've mentioned the food aspect of, some of the things you've discovered and have changed.
Yep.
And you also mentioned some of the emotional awareness and how, things have resurfaced. And so you're addressing those things as well. What else would you say are things that you've discovered that really are beneficial or not for you?
So as far as things I'm doing for myself?
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed a big change on is really, and this was around the time I was pregnant with my daughter, when I really started to understand around the toxins that are in your home. And it's pervasive. It's really tough in the United States specifically to avoid a lot of that stuff. And I just sort of slowly chip away. But a good example is we were away, like I said, on vacation. This past week, we were staying in Airbnbs, and I walked into this Airbnb and I was like, oh my God, I can't even be in here. They had, and I mean, I'm like a detective. I'm going all around and I, and I find, cause you're in someone else's home, you're staying
Right.
on, I'm sure that it's non-organic sheet, whatever, all the things. But I mean, they had these like plug-in air fresheners. I'm like, I have to unplug these immediately. I had to put them outside. I'm like, I can't even. And so it's at this point, I can't even be around
Mm.
them. I'm so like distant from it.
Yes.
And so beginning to like just eliminate a lot of that stuff from my life, it has made a huge difference in just like we were talking about my toxic bucket. So like those are all things that now aren't going in, you know what I mean, to my toxic bucket.
Right.
So I've just made slowly over time, I just picked, oh, my face wash ran out. I need a like really clean one. And so I'll just replace that. And I've done a lot over the last 10 years with that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you say you did it slowly over time. I don't know about, when people come to you, you have clients, but I know when clients come to me, they can be so overwhelmed with
yes.
what do I do first? Like they're like, I know I need to fix my eating and I need to exercise more and I need to do the non-toxic stuff. Like, where do I even start? And I'm like, whoa, sister, like, let's pick one area. Are
Yep.
we going to do food? Are we going to do exercise? Are we going to do one area? And then in that one area, let's start slowly. So I did the same thing, right? I heard a podcast several years ago. And then I started listening more to different things. And then I started reading more labels and I was like, okay, what can we do? And so I started with deodorant, right?
Yep.
When
Same,
we ran out
actually.
of deodorant, yeah, it was like, okay, we're going to switch to this deodorant instead. And so, and what was really cool was, you're talking about your children. What was cool was my kids were not wearing deodorant yet at that
Yep.
point,
Yep.
but by the time they were, I knew that there were some that were better than others. So I
Yeah.
started my older son on a better option.
Yep.
So, as parents, we, sometimes feel very guilty about, the things that we pass on or the things that we do or don't do. It's like, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
Now that you know, make the change as best as you can. So yeah, you can start slowly and add things in little by little. I moved on to cleaning products and
Yeah.
those types of things. It's amazing. Like the cleaning product, I'm like, it's
Oh,
supposed to be cleaning my house. Meanwhile, it's slowly like
killing us
building
all.
mucus in my head because
Yeah.
I'm just sniffing this stuff.
Yes. Yes.
And like you said, now if I do use a cleaning product that in my house, I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
let's open up all the windows, turn on all the fans.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I think what you brought up a good point there, which was around the like guilt, around that like mom guilt that you feel when you either are pushing something that nobody wants, because I've been there, or you didn't push something was a good idea, but because there was pushback, you kind of gave up. I mean, there's a million reasons to feel guilty.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the biggest things that I talk about a lot with people is around the idea of it's not going to be perfect. It just isn't. Life isn't, first of all. So let's just start with that. But, anything you do is taking you closer to where you want to be.
Mhm.
Literally anything, and over like, I'm sure I look like a crazy person to whom people that come in my house sometimes, I've got air filters going and, I've got a crazy water tap and who knows, whatever. But I didn't do all of that the first run out of the gates. You know what I mean? But it's at the same time, it's, my daughter went to the mall yesterday with a friend, and it was really one of the few times because she became a teenager during COVID. So where she's really been like alone, and she's shopping and she has her own money, and she came back with some perfume and I was like, and she like, oh God. And she knows, she's like, Mom, I know I looked up this lipstick and I know that it's clean because I looked it up. And I was like, you know what? This is a win because you're trying. And I didn't even bother to look it up myself because I'm like, you know what? This is a win. We've done something here. You're hearing something
Right.
because she loves makeup. So it's been a big discussion in our house over the last year that she's really wanted to begin wearing makeup. It's like, I have no problem with you wearing, I love makeup. I'm like, but we have to be really careful about what you bring in and what you put on yourself, because you've had some issues and you don't want to make those worse, And so it's nice, I guess, is really going back to that mom guilt, is like, as much as I might feel guilty over here, something is sinking in
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced similar as well. I try to get up and walk in the mornings, and
Yep.
I do workouts at home and things like that, trying to just get things in how I can during the day.
Yeah.
And over the summer, my kids have a summer to-do list with reading and a math worksheet or whatever. And my younger son said, "Mom, I'm going to add 5 push-ups every day to my
Nice.
daily to-do list." And I was like, okay,
You're like, don't look too closely. Okay.
yeah.
Don't draw attention.
Yeah. So for the moms out there who are like, my kids won't eat the organic, or they won't, whatever, they like to sit inside, whatever you are doing, keep doing it.
Right.
Keep being the role model for them. Demonstrate the behavior. They are watching you. They are listening to you. They are picking things up. It will get better. And, of course, you can't control every little thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it will get better.
I think that's the hardest part, is really like, as a parent, I don't think I was prepared for that, like, part of parenting where it's that, where you don't get to decide everything they do. You have to let them go. You have to let them experience. You have to let them try something and fail. And that's really difficult. That's really difficult. And so just really trying, it's been now, my daughter has the same food sensitivities I have and some other issues. So they go to summer camp. My kids go to sleepaway camp. So I have no control over what you do when you're there. You're choosing your own food. And last year she went and came back, I mean, like a lobster with eczema. I mean, just miserable. And I was like, oh, I think it's the gluten. Okay. And she was like, Mom, I just want to eat gluten. Okay. So this year when I sent her, it was like, you may consider not doing that. I'm just going to throw that out there. And she was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And when I went for the visiting weekend, was she eating perfectly gluten-free? No, but I actually saw her make a lot of gluten-free choices. And I was like, wow, okay. So we still had some eczema when she came home, but it was much less. And I feel like now she has an understanding of what's going on. There was a lot more cause and effect. I feel like, that she saw that connection. And she actually came to me yesterday and said, can we talk tomorrow about what I'm going to do about my food? I said, yep. Meanwhile, I'm like,
I know.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
It's but that letting go of that control and watching them fail a little bit is hard. It's not easy. So kudos to any mom that's doing it, because it's very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, today you're looking well, you're looking vibrant.
Thank you.
You're smiling and laughing. So certainly things have changed over time for you. So when you look back at that young woman and then you turn to today, what are some things that you've noticed in terms of change and energy or sleep or whatever it is?
Oh, everything is better today than it was, to be honest, I suffered for like 20, 25 years, up and down and up and down and up and down. And I think I'll get to how I feel better in a second, but I think just a point I would like to make is something I would like to say to the old me is around just, I wish that I had known that there was other options. I just didn't even know that it existed. So it wasn't like I knew it was there and I decided not to take that road. I just didn't know. And so it's important to me now to like, just tell people it's there and you can decide to take it or not take it, but just to know that there's another path available to you. And as far as feeling better, I mean, my sleep was the hardest thing for me to dial in. but it's finally in a good place for the most part. And a lot of it comes back down to like stress hormones. So like, they can keep you up at night if people don't know that. And I had all of those internal stressors, but I had a ton of outside stressors as well. So those things I'm sleeping better. My gut troubles are mostly resolved at this point, or when I'm having them, I know exactly what I did, that brought me to this place, and I can kind of like backtrack and fix it. So, yeah. And just my stress responses, I think like I focus in gut health for the most part with clients, because I think that's the foundation for most things.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, for me, my stress responses, I've worked a lot on my stress responses over the years in different ways. I'm also an EFT practitioner, so tapping, and just learning how to dial down my own stress response when it's happening, because you can't avoid stress. It took me a while. It's almost like, how when you're making progress on something, but you can't see the progress until you get so far. And then you look back and you're like, I see now how that is working. That's kind of where I am now with that. It's like when the stressful event happens and I recover really quickly, I'm like, oh, wow, the old me could have never done that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is like all from looking at things from a holistic perspective. You can go down a million roads on why that happened, because I've done a million things for that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which one brought me to this place. I just have so much more stress resiliency than I ever did in the past. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
teaching those skills to my kids, which is really important to me. So
Yeah.
does that
Yeah.
answer your question? I feel like I went down a road there.
Totally. Yes. Yes. Totally answered my question. Um, so, as we kind of wrap up here, if there was one thing you could leave with somebody who's listening, what would you say to them?
Well, I think I would go back to kind of what I just said, and understanding that there is a path available to you. But just to like piggyback on that, it may not look like what you think. It's very likely more simple than you think, because I think oftentimes people are looking for quick fixes or very complex answers because the problem feels complex.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes it takes a while and it's very simple,
Yeah.
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 And I think just understanding that, like just take the step, do the thing, pick something and start. And don't be afraid to reach out for help. I mean, there are people like us that love this stuff and could talk about it all day and are totally willing and ready to help people. And I think that is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a cool time for that,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kaci, thank you so much for sharing all that you did. I know that so many are going to be encouraged by what you shared.
Oh, thank you.
If people want to connect with you or ask more questions, or maybe just follow you on social media, where can they find you?
I am my website is Kaci, Kaci and Co Wellness. I can send you the link. You can drop it below. And I'm at that same on most social media, Instagram, Facebook. I do have a group coaching program called the Energy Revival System. I focus mostly on moms like us who are doing all the things, are super busy, working and trying to do the family and all the things. And they just don't know where to start with their own health. And finding the energy that they need to do all the things, because the fact of the matter is life is busy, and pretending it isn't going to solve the problem. So that's really my passion, is like helping moms to like get started, get that ball rolling. And you can find information about any of those things on all of my places.
Okay, well, I will include that in the show description. And
Awesome.
again, thank you so much for your time and sharing all that you did. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too. Me too. It was so fun.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who are catching the convo, make sure you like and subscribe and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. And I will see you next time. Bye.